All right, so I'm back on again with James from C-Level Operations in Australia. And last time we talked about sales and project delivery and scoping, those sorts of things. Had good feedback from on YouTube and LinkedIn video. My name is Wim Kerkhoff. I'm the founder of TopLeft, as well as two of my own MSPs here in Canada. And James and I are doing a series just around projects, because that's a big pain point that a lot of us have. So welcome back, James.
Thanks for having me, and g'day everyone. If you haven't joined the series before, I'm James, Managing Director of C-Level Operations down here in Australia and APAC. We coach lots of MSPs on what the best practices are to better run their businesses and create more value and have more sustainable businesses for their people as well. So this should be an exciting topic around talking about sales handoff to projects. This is one of the ones that anytime I start talking about projects, first thing everyone brings up is, oh, those sales guys that just cause us so many problems. So let's dive into it today and talk about how we can, what issues are caused and what we can do about it in some simple methods to stop reducing that friction and make projects more successful.
Yeah. Well, I know from experience, I've caused a lot of those problems. So I've come from a technical background, programming and sysadmin and networking and everything, and then got into being an entrepreneur. And it's one thing doing my own projects, but then I'd sell a project and then hand it off to my team to do and go off to selling more. And they would mess it up and be frustrated and everything. So learned a lot along the way of how to make that flow.
Clearly the project department that's the problem, isn't it? It's not sales and that.
Oh,
It's never sales.
No. Yeah.
With that, what I find is the most common cause is exactly like what you said. It's like salespeople have a different focus to what project people do, and it's important to start with that understanding of sales is a tough job. You're trying to close the deals. You only need to cover certain details to get the deals done. Whereas the project people are much more detail orientated and a lot more focused on the technical parts. And that's where we start with that friction in the first place. One's very transactional. Projects are a lot more process driven, should be a lot more process driven and a lot more action orientated. So what we often find is details that the project people think are important are not the same thing as what's important in that sales conversation. We're talking about different things. So what we need to look at firstly is what are the key information that project needs to pick up that sales can find out and provide in that handoff in the first place. And one of those things are always missed in all of this. We're assuming you're getting your scoping right, like we spoke about last time we caught up. It's like what's actually promised to the client. What are the delivery dates? What are the outcomes the clients are expecting? What have the salespeople promised so that projects can actually go and deliver to that? It can be as simple as like some one-liners in our PSAs, in our opportunities. We could have a little form that we fill out. There's so many different ways that we can communicate that, but we often don't. So that frustration that you spoke about is like, you as the owner, you go out and sell a project. How much did it drag you down when you had to come back in and talk about the project from 3 projects ago that you sold? How much is that as a momentum killer for you as a salesperson?
Yeah, it's huge if I have to go back in and patch things up with the client because we didn't deliver it or re-explain it again and again. That's just, yeah, there's a cost to that. It's bad energy and we're inefficient, slowing it down. Yeah.
Such a simple thing too, isn't it? But it's something we always forget because we've got different priorities. And I think that's what I see a lot of organizations struggle with, is like that difference between the sales and project responsibility. They do genuinely want to help support each other, because you as a salesperson don't want to be dragged back in. You just want to move on. You want it successful to the client. Projects want to deliver it successfully for the client and not have to bring the salespeople in.
Yeah.
But we always get that consistent friction.
Yeah.
And it really just comes down to such a simple method of we just need to write some stuff down and let it flow through to the project people to pick up. It's nothing more than that, but from my experience, very few MSPs do that.
Yeah. Just writing it down. And what we've added is a kickoff, like a proper handoff transition to meet with the service team, because no matter how well I write it down, there's gonna be things missing. To have an opportunity where we get together, walk through any notes I had from the sales conversations, anything that's in my head, they can pick my brain, say, hey, what about this? What about that? And I'm like, oh yeah, this is what I think they believe, but I hadn't written down because it was a bit more of an between the lines. That's been really helpful, is to do a proper hand transition and not to say, here's the signed a quote works or a quote will sell or ConnectWise sell agreement, and here you go.
And how, when you
kicking it off with the client is I hand it off to the client, and then they talk to the client directly to reconfirm everything, because it's still, before we actually officially start doing the work, there's still an opportunity to fine tune that language and what's being done. So they'll get on to the client and just verify anything that I had sold. We're done.
And I completely agree. Like, it's the best practice that a lot of people don't do with that. Just like setting an agendaed meeting, and it doesn't have to be long for not very complex projects, doesn't it? Like, you can do a 15-minute mind dump for a smaller project to go, just here's all the information, get on the same page. And like you said, then going and talking to the client. Again, same page. And what I find with the people that do some of these meetings with the kickoff calls with clients, so they always put the salesperson as the one to go back and talk to the client. And that's defeating the purpose. They've already spoken to them. They've already sold it.
Yeah.
We're not adding any value to anyone at that point a lot of the time. And a lot of that comes from us as MSPs wanting to make the account manager as the face of the company to clients. And what I find is actually there's more value in putting the project person that's in charge of the project. So if it's project manager or the technical lead, it creates depth of relationships in the business. It's not just one single account manager. Now, well, actually, there's a project person that I'll talk to for that sort of thing. And that engagement from that client kickoff, if we're doing that well and we're doing that professionally from the sales handover and having that internal kickoff meeting, and then being able to talk to the client directly, you're setting up that depth of professionalism across the organization. The client trusts you more and more, and they've got more relationships with other people. So there's so many advantages from spreading that responsibility out and letting the account manager move on. Let them get momentum with the next client, and we should trust that our project team can deliver now. Let's leave them to it and only be brought in if there's a massive escalation.
Yeah.
That's what I see cripple a lot of the smaller MSPs, is like the owner is the salesperson. So that momentum, like you were talking about, of, oh, I'll go sell, that's already difficult in the first place for most MSPs, because we don't have a repeatable and standardized process for us selling projects or recurring revenue. So each time we're already on the back foot getting that in front of clients. And then we get dragged back into that project. So it's not only your mental energy and the momentum and the good vibes that we were talking about before, it's also the bottom line. Because what happens is we get super busy with sales because clients demanding stuff, then we sell it, and then it takes ages to deliver, and we're not selling anything. So it's always that roller coaster of up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah.
Purely from some of these simple things of like our not communicating and handing off very well. And that's really common when it's the principal-led sales. That's so if you're that, start looking at these sort of things, and every time I've seen it from coaching people, when we smooth this kind of stuff out, funnily enough, the financial performance smooths out quite a lot as well. So it's not just a feel-good exercise. We can get a lot of good efficiencies and profit from this as well. That's more consistent.
Yeah. The key thing is consistent, and then not overloading, and we can do tons of crazy work for a week or two on this big project and then slow. It's like we want consistent, serious throughput. But we don't want people overwhelmed, overloaded, burnt out, getting sloppy, dropping the communication, because yeah, it has a ripple effect that can last for months later. And
And
the other thing that's helped me is with that handoff to service or to the team, is involving them earlier in the sales process so that they're contributing to writing that statement of work and that they believe it. And hey, this is the right thing. It's clear to them. And then that handoff is really just natural because they're already familiar with it. So just getting the rest of them up to speed, because maybe there's one engineer who helped to scope it out and did an assessment or went on site with me. But yeah, if the earlier they're in there and contributing, it's less me. And I realized this goes back a few years ago. Like I'm not really into sales conversations at all anymore. But I'm like, hey, maybe I was a good tech 10, 15 years ago, but I'm rusty and I don't have all the answers. So I can have the discovery conversation and sell be confident in myself and the team. But then to actually quote it out accurately, I need to bring in my team to look at it, assess it, come up with a plan. So when I realized that several years ago, that was really good.
Well, and that's how you develop leadership and knowledge internally as well. If you're the owner and just hold it all close to your chest, then that's all you're ever going to be able to do. You're not going to be able to engage others to build this out. And it's a really good point about bringing people a bit earlier in the process, not only for the project guys to be able to deliver the projects, but actually for sales to know what the project loads are. Because most often, salespeople aren't promising to turn around stuff really quickly just because they can. It's we all know the sales is fairly high pressure and we need to get the deal. It's generally projects can't actually project or forecast what the loads are. So it's always much safer for the salespeople to just go, yeah, I can jam this in, we'll just push it through, because they won't have any clear, concrete thing to talk to the client. It'll just come off as extremely vague of, oh, we're busy. We'll have to do it in some sort of point in time, rather than being able to
fit it in somewhere. But yeah, most MSPs don't really understand when they can not only start it, because we can start anything anytime, but when can we finish it, and what's ahead of it in the queue? Because there isn't really the idea of queuing projects of saying one at a time, and it's got to come after the next one. No, we start everything. We try to do everything in parallel, and they all sit there jammed up in our project pipeline for months. So that's why we got into things like Kanban and visualizing that workflow to understand that bigger picture. And when could we onboard the next client and actually be done onboarding and on to the next one?
It's doing it once, doing it right, isn't it? It's not trying to do multiple things and dropping things and then waiting, because it's not just the pipeline for being able to do new stuff. It goes back to that financial reality, doesn't it? If we can't do a project, have it scheduled out, get it done, we're never going to meet budget, because as soon as it becomes an open project, that's all it's ever going to be, and we don't know when we should close it, and we'll create more issues, and it'll keep staying around. And when most MSPs don't do any billing up front, we're waiting for that project to be closed and get any type of cash at that point. That's the real scary part as well, which in this sales to project handover, we've only been talking sales to project team. We haven't talked about the other important departments that come into this, and finance for me with projects is number one. I don't know about you, Wim, but I don't particularly want to do a project if I'm not making money out of it and I can't control the money that I'm making. And we don't really have projects and finance working together early enough in the piece. Often I see in the flow of that sales to projects handoff, it's straight from sales to projects, and the project guys, like you just said, we have to fit it in, so we'll get it started. And once we've given it to the project team, the horse is bolted. How can we bill anything then and control the finances at that point?
Yeah, we've been actually pretty good about that, is billing everything up front, either fixed fee or retainer, getting our money up front. So on the cash side, we've been good. But cash and profitability is two different things. And obviously you can do it fixed price or retainer. So on fixed price, if it's taking us too long, we're not profitable. But that's on us. It's not the client that really gets impacted. Although if it's taking too long, at some point they get frustrated, like, hey, why is it not done? But it's not going to cost them more. Unless they're, maybe not getting the benefit from it. But on a retainer model, okay, it's time, money for time, which is great. But at some point they'll be like, hey, you said you estimated 100 hours, but you're at 200 hours. Well, you're going to just really piss off the client at some point. So even on a retainer, you still got to stay within the ballpark you gave them. So that's where a good statement of work, a good handoff, reducing your risk and unknowns is really important. I've learned that. And so we can be profitable. It doesn't actually matter how it's built, but we're going to manage the flow and the profitability and deliver an expectation. So I've learned that. That's both on project services as well as managed services. You can do managed services hourly too and do really well on an hourly model. It's just another way of billing it. But you can drive the same attitudes and thinking of being efficient and automation and reducing waste, regardless of how you bill it. I believe that.
I 100% agree too. And I think I like the point of cash doesn't equal profit, because a lot of the time, especially with projects, the average MSP is doing fairly well with their managed services, recurring revenue these days, that projects and their cash can often hide the profitability in how we're reporting on it as well. Like, we all get excited when we get that $50,000 worth of product revenue from the hardware that we might take up front. But then that gets hidden with the amount of labor we're burning behind the scenes, because we're either not collecting the cash in the first place, or we're not monitoring that profitability at all. And I think it is important to really understand the billing component of how you're doing it and how you need to deliver it. And that point of retainer versus like a fixed fee. A lot of people that I find, they're talking fixed fee, but they're actually doing it as a retainer or an estimate, rather than fully being able to scope that out and say, well, this Office 365 migration is $10,000, and that's how much we take to do that job. People are finding that pressure in that sales side of not having confidence in their project delivery. So it's much easier to go, well, I estimate it'll be about 50 hours labor, and then we'll work it out afterwards. And we always know, as soon as we put an estimate in front of the client, you're almost guaranteed to be held to that estimate, like you're saying. It's not, people aren't going to let you off the hook if you said that it's going to be 50 and now it's 100. And every MSP that I see that do that end up going, oh, all right, we did say 50, so but we'll bill you for 60. We'll negotiate down. If you're in that position, that's where most projects fail in the first place, is from that sort of financial component. And I really recommend getting to the point where it's fixed fee. Like, there's obviously projects in general that might require a retainer. We've only ever done it once, or it's way more complicated, or it's very bespoke. But the more that we can do fixed price projects that are standardized, that have the same exceptions every time, it's not just good for us with profitability managing the efficiency. It's actually better for the clients, because we can deliver it well every single time, and we know what's going to happen. And that gives them comfort as well in the sales process. If we can say it's going to be $10,000 and they know we're going to deliver it, there's a lot less pushback. And I found for myself, when I was managing an MSP, being able to say take 100% payment and work by fixed fee, all those issues of, like, if we took too long or we spent more hours than we should, that's my problem at that point. But I've got all the cash. Whereas when I found myself in MSP world, or in my sort of construction background, if I was taking payment in arrears, the client would always hold you to ransom to pay the end amount, because they aren't expecting the bill at that point. They haven't planned ahead to go, well, we need that cash flow at that point. So that is a constant trap that I see all the time. And that's very hard to manage too, when we're going back to this sales to project handoff, when we haven't set those expectations with the client or internally with the project team. Because then they can just be held ransom in the project team because it's not clearly outlined what were we actually delivering and what were their outcomes and expectations. So
Yep.
we end up giving everything to our clients.
Yep, definitely need something there that we can defend and not let the client slip in more and more features. And there was a gray area. It's hard for the text to push back and to say, I think it seems like it's part of that. So it needs to be a very defined box. And then, yeah, there's just not having that fear of just going back and say, hey, that's extra or that's a change. And we need to ask for another 5 hours or 50 hours or whatever it is. Or, hey, we're happy to do that, but let's finish the phase 1 and then we'll make that a phase 2. So that's what I've learned is, I've been scared of those conversations and it just costs me money. So we have to set the stage for that up front, set the expectation. This is what the scope is based on what we know today. And if it changes, then we'll have a discussion and figure out the terms for it. That's just fair. That's just a fair deal.
Right. Most clients are fair people too, aren't they? Like from your experience, there's not many businesses out there trying to rip people off, right?
It's just, I've learned you can't come when the project is done and say, oh yeah, it's going to cost you another $5,000. It doesn't work. But if you came in early in the process, then it's no problem. Yeah.
Well, the other area I see a lot that comes out of this at the starting point that sets projects up to fail is working with procurement, especially in this global pandemic that we're having and the supply chain issues. It's even more challenging than it's ever been. But the flow from sales to projects, we spoke about needing to make sure we're getting billing right. This also applies to the procurement side too. I often see a lot of the misalignment between billing and procurement and projects, that there's no real order. So it always defaults to, well, let's just order it in and let's just get the project started as soon as possible. But we haven't taken the cash up front for this hardware. We're not actually prepared to deliver the project yet. And the procurement arrives when it arrives. No one actually knows that it's there because no one's typically responsible for it. The project manager's just worried about the chaos that they're dealing with and the projects they've already started. Finance doesn't know it's even going on. Procurement has just processed it because it's flowed through the PSA, and there's no interconnection there to make sure it's an efficient turnaround. And what ends up happening is that communication piece isn't there because no one knows who's responsible for what. And the client's just left waiting of, when are we starting this project? What's going on? If there's any delays in the procurement part, which there is very much in this day and age, no one's talking to the client to say, actually, we've got another 2-week delay because the products aren't available. That just sets a poor tone from the very start in communication. It goes against everything that you just said about managing scope.
Yeah.
How do you guys handle that sort of responsibility?
Well, compared to a lot of MSPs, we actually don't do that much hardware. It's pretty low. I'll be on the Linux side. There's like no hardware. It's all cloud. So procurement isn't an issue there. And on the Windows MSP, a lot of our clients are managing their own hardware because they have IT managers and we're doing more code manage. So it's not that much. There's a little bit, but it hasn't really been a pain point on the procurement. We order it, like quotes approved. We're using QuoteWorks as our quoting proposal platform. It gets approved. We get the payment from the client, go and order it, let them know how long it's going to take. Yeah, and all the tickets flow and it gets done. So I don't know, just somehow it's working well for us. Like we have a process and we use procurement module and ConnectWise Manage now. We have been for a few years. So it all flows through. Yeah, I guess just the automation in ConnectWise actually works. So
it does, and it's transparent too. Like you can jump in the project and see where the products are up to on the purchase orders, and that's usually the problem. We're not leveraging our tools, and we haven't put a clear process and responsibilities in. As soon as we do that, it flows. And if there's product delays, if someone knows that they're responsible for it, they can talk to the client and say there's some delays. Like clients understand this. You can't you can't go to normal shops and buy a lot off the shelf at the moment with electronics. So it's not like they're not aware of it. They just need to be communicated in a proactive manner, and a lot of these problems go away.
Yeah.
And I think with everything that we're talking about today, that's what really the sales, the project handoff is some very simple, clear delineation of responsibilities, some simple processes, using the tools that are there, and then just making sure people are following it, and talk to clients when something goes wrong in the process. There's nothing big and revolutionary in this part, but this is one of the most, personally, I think this is one of the most under neglected areas of the process, project flows.
Yeah.
We talk about scoping and we talk about like the delivery. We don't talk about these initial processes that need to occur across multiple people.
Yeah.
Do that right, projects are going to be on a good foot from the very start.
Yeah.
And you get to set the team up for success.
Yeah. Good. Wow. That's going to be very helpful for a lot of MSPs, what we've covered there. So thanks for sharing that. Can't think of anything else to ask there. Can I plug the webinar we're doing shortly on project management?
That'd be awesome.
I believe that's February 3rd. I'll post a link in the description in the comments when we post this video online. And that Matt from our TopLeft team will be presenting about how to do agile-based project management flow. And that's the key thing. How do we get the throughput up on projects, breaking down the work, getting it going, getting it done, not having it linger around. And because we know the quicker we deliver to client, a good project for the client, the quicker they're going to give us more and more referrals. So if they're confident we can do the work, get her done, not just promise and then it kind of lingers, but getting it done, and minimizing all the admin on coordinating projects and scheduling. How do we minimize that to make it easier for project managers to see what's going on and manage it? So we have a webinar that really teaches how to do that. That's useful even if you're not using our TopLeft product, regardless of what PSA you're using it, those principles will be very helpful. So check that out. And what are we going to go through next time, James?
Oh, that's a good question. What do you reckon? I feel like there's so much more that we're going to cover. So we're only at the tip of the iceberg. We're only setting up success. I guess we're starting to get into the nitty gritty about actually managing the delivery. At this point, aren't we? So let's dive into that.
Like scope creep and change management, how that impacts billing. Our technicians doing both service and project, and that all the issues with that we can get into.
All the minor issues, right? Like everyone's got those problems solved. It'll be a quick one.
Oh, a lot struggle with it. So keeps coming up.
Well, I look forward to catching up with you then, and hopefully people watching this have gotten some gold nuggets out of this and can remove some friction and solve some of those issues. Again, not a lot of this is really rocket science and have to overcomplicate it. Start simple. If you're not doing some of the stuff that we've spoken about, start simple, have a look at it, and you're already going to be better off. Yeah.
Yeah, it should be common sense things. Put that in place and keep getting better every time. Don't make the same mistakes again. Doing retrospectives, what went well on this project, what didn't, and then updating, not just to talk about and say, hey, we sucked here, or we should have been more clear in the SOW, but then update your process so that actually doesn't happen again.
That's some sage advice. I think that's the real winner. It's incremental improvements, slow incremental improvements every time.
Good. All right. Thanks, James.
Thanks, Wim.